Thank you, Dr. Pravda.
Thank you, Doctor. I invite the judges, if they have any questions, to please go ahead with it.
Yeah, I agree that answering a questionnaire is quite difficult, and many people would like to get over it and or avoid it. So I think this is in the right direction. And dry eye is a common problem, and all of us face this. And a simple and very correlatable uh, scores or these performers would be helpful for each of us, and we should standardize them after coming to a conclusion.
Yeah. And is Dr. Pravda, is there was any rationale to take two-thirds of female and
I mean, to call the patients which came our way. The incidental finding is that there were two-thirds females.
okay, okay.
Yeah, I think if there are no other questions, I think maybe we can move on. And
Thank you, then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Tuhin Chowdhury, can you please upload your presentation?
Okay, good morning, sir. Just I'm sharing my screen now. Can you share my, okay. Is it visible now?
Yes,
And
please.
Dr. Tahin, your timer will be on. You'll have to conclude within 6 minutes.
Okay. Now my paper is on simple limbal epithelial transplantation, that is SLATE, the comparisons of outcomes of two different techniques. So we all know that SLATE was first described by Sangwan et al. In 2012, and it was been found that with currently used surgical techniques for management of LSCD, that is limbal stem cell deficiency, SLATE seems to be a safe, reproducible, and effective alternative. So in classical SLATE, a small donor limbal graft from the unaffected eye is harvested and divided into smaller pieces that are then expanded in vivo in the stem cell deficient eye over the human amniotic membrane using fibrin glue. Now, in 2014, Amuska et al. First described this modification of this technique, where two amniotic membrane layers were used to sandwich and protect the harvested limbal stem cells. So this is the schematic representations. This is a limbal deficient eye where there is symblepharon. So first we have to release the symblepharon and then go for this 360-degree congenital peritomy, and then put the amniotic membrane graft, and then take the limbal transplants from the other eye and then put it over the amniotic membrane graft, and then put a bandage contact lens. In modified SLATE, where we have to put another piece of amniotic membrane and then suture it by tenon-nylon circumferential for string suture. So the purpose of this study is to compare the long-term clinical outcomes of two variants of autologous SLATE, that is C-SLATE and M-SLATE, for treating cases of unilateral LSCD. This was a single-center prospective comparative interventional case series in our institute from June 2014 to August 2019 by the presenting author. So there were 27 cases of SLATE, out of which 12 cases underwent C-SLATE and M-SLATE had 15 cases. So these are the etiologies, and most of the cases are because of alkali injuries. And children were having 9 cases and adults are having 18 cases, and in all children underwent this M-SLATE techniques. Partial LSCD and total LSCD. Partial LSCD was found in 7 cases, where this is all partial LSCD cases also underwent only C-SLATE, classical SLATE. And total LSCD cases out of 20, that means 13 cases underwent this M-SLATE. So main outcome measures were that follow-up ranged from 1 to 4.5 years and with a median of 1.6 years. And the success of SLATE was considered when the recipient eye was completely epithelialized with vascular cornea. And failure was defined as the recurrence of the progressive conjunctivalization onto the central 8 mm with or without persistent epithelial defect. So this is the diagram where this out of 12 cases of C-SLATE, 8 had successful results and 12 in cases of M-SLATE have successful results. And if you look at the survival rate, these C-SLATEs are having 66%, 66.6% of the survival rate, and whereas in M-SLATE it is 80% cases. So just going to the statistical analysis, a stable ocular surface, that is successful outcome, were seen in 20 out of 27 eyes with a confidence interval of 74.047 with a range of 57.54 to 9.6%. Failure was found in 4 cases of C-SLATE, that is 33.3%, and 3 cases of M-SLATE, that is 20% cases. Since 74.07 is a more than threshold value, it is claimed that slate is indeed successful. And from the binomial proportion test for equality of the success rates, in these two types of slate, the G-score was obtained is 0.73, which leads to the corresponding p-value of 0.2147. This provides definite support for the fact that the difference in success rates of M-slate and C-slate is significantly larger than 0, or in other words, the success rate of M-slate is larger than that of C-slate. However, in order to perform a more informative test, for example, a test of 10% significance level with more observations are needed in future. This is the phases of risk of failure. It is found that thermal injuries had worse prognosis, and patients with pre-existing symblepharon in both the leads extending onto the cornea had very poor prognosis for recurrence, that is 4 out of 5 cases, 80% of the cases. In C-slate, 2 patients had postoperative loss of transplants and 1 needed repeat surgery. This is the patient who lost these transplants and then repeat surgery, and this is the result. Still not very good. So in M-slate, double AMG was used as a modification to protect and secure the limbal transplants. This procedure is quite easy and can be replicated by most ophthalmic surgeons. The ideal candidate for M-slate are children with unilateral LSCD with wet ocular surface, where the chance of loss of transplants because of accidental rubbing are quite high, and in patients with symblepharon. Our strength of this study was that this is having this highest, that longest follow-up, but in modified slate technique by Amish Kautal, they had only less than 1 year follow-up, but out of 4 patients, 4 had very good results. So this is another study of modification by Chinese authors, where they have put this directly onto the one, and they found that quite good results. So to conclude, the results of both the technique of slate are effective and promising for the management of unilateral LSCD and seem to be safe and reproducible. In M-slate, the use of so-called sandwich technique provided protective environment for the graft and the limbal stem cell niche without compromising the clinical outcome. The long-lasting corneal regeneration is significantly better in M-slate than C-slate, and M-slate should be practiced especially in children. So the pitfall of the study was that this was non-randomized. Limbal stem cell deficiency was diagnosed, and post-slate patients were evaluated clinically without confocal microscopy or impression cytologic analysis. These are my references, and thank you for time.
Thank you so much. I request the judges, if they have any question, they may shoot.
Good presentation.
Go ahead, Dr. Deepshika.
That is fine, please.
Yeah, actually, I was wondering, what is your post SLET treatment schedule, or how long do you give steroids for?
Usually, we give in tapering dosage for only just topical steroids, no oral steroids. Oral steroids are given only those patients with alloslate. But here it is this autoslate, so we are giving only topical steroids, that is 6 weeks in tapering dosage. Usually dexamethasone is initially 4 times, then 3 times, then 2 times, then 1 time, like that way. If the inflammation is severe, then we can go for 6 times also.
So you are using for 6 weeks.
For 6 weeks. Yeah.
After 6 weeks, you stop treatment?
Stop it, and then we see that whether there is this. In some cases where there is inflammation is persisting, we can give some sort of cyclosporin or anything like that, but no steroids, because these patients are having tendency to develop steroid responsiveness and then can develop glaucoma also.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to request Dr. Pradeep Pant. Has he already joined us?
Yeah, sorry, madam, little late, but fine.
It's okay,
no
sir.
problem.
It's
I was not
okay.
getting.
I'd like to introduce you to one of our convener, Dr. Pradeep Pant, ladies and gentlemen. And moving on to the next presenter, please.
Can I ask one question, madam, please?
Yes, please go ahead.
See, how long is the follow-up?
2 minutes.
How long you do the follow-up?
So for these patients, whoever is having less than 1 year of follow-up, we just we didn't include in the study. Our follow-up ranged from that was 1 year to 4.5 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, let's move on to the 4th presenter, Dr. Alok Sati. Can you please load your slides?
Yeah, is it visible?
Yes, it is
Yes.
visible.
Is it full screen?
Not full screen.
Okay. So,
Press on the icon in the top, in the bottom right.
okay.
Yes.
Fine. Yeah, is it now full screen?
Yes, please.
Please.
Yeah, okay. So I'm starting now. A very warm greeting from our institute. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it full screen now? Yeah, is it full screen?
Yes.
Yeah. The topic is femtosecond laser assisted sutureless deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty. Traditionally, we have been observing DALC being performed by manual, big bubble, and suture included femtosecond laser, but the issues are many, especially the suture related. So can we circumvent it? Yes, by performing sutureless femtosecond laser technique, as we expect more firm opposition between donor and host cornea. So that's how we innovated this technique. And the purpose is to evaluate the outcome of this newer technique. This is a prospective study. We have taken 10 eyes with corneal scar as a pilot project. And the depth of the opacity was assessed by basically ASOCT. And this is the surgical technique where we feed the donor cornea, especially the thickness and the diameter that you can observe here, and the side cut. And this is the recipient where we expect the donor diameter to be similar to that of recipient. So this is the technique which I would like to share with you all. So this is the donor treatment data. You can see that the diameter is 7.5. This is the donor cornea that is being, we are taking the donor lenticule with the help of femtosecond laser. This is 7.5 millimeter diameter donor cornea that you can observe. And this is, we are using that SMILE instrument. That's what we call as the hook or Sinskey hook. So now we have taken the donor tissue. Now the treatment data on the recipient bed, the diameter has to be same, the side cut has to be 90 degree. We prefer little lesser thickness in this because we expect the donor cornea to be little swollen because of its storage. And this is the laser which we are applying in the donor, sorry, in the recipient. And this is what we have got, again 7.5 millimeter. The cuts are very, very accurate, and they don't have ragged edges basically in this technique. So we have gone almost to the depth of 465 micron, and this is the donor tissue which we have placed. You can see a very well apposition, and we have made adhere to the surrounding host cornea with the help of only fibrin glue. Here we haven't used any suture. And then the bandage contact lens application. So we have followed the patients after the surgery, and we have basically looked for BCVA keratometry and complications. Now, this is a demographic profile which you can see here. And we have taken the mean thickness of the recipient lenticules and mean diameter, as you can see. And this is of the donor lenticule, which is more as compared to that of recipient. And this is the mean BCVA that we have got from pre-op it's to the tune of 3/60. It has improved to around 618. And this is the post-op astigmatism at 6 months to the tune of around 2 diopter. If you look into the complications, we haven't got any complications actually. So first thing is it really DALK? Yes, because we are approaching almost 50 micron to the Descemet membrane. What about the edge effect? You can see the edge almost, tuned to the host cornea in 1 month. How strong is their position? We have done 3 phacos following it with normal parameters, and we haven't found any case of popping off the graft during the procedure. So the stability is quite well achieved. So it's a very promising technique, and I think it has the ability to change the practice pattern in the future. However, we require a large cohort to finally conclude the results. Thank you.
It's a nice video. The cases which you have selected of opacity of the same, like the depth you are taking from the recipient, the same thickness you are taking out, or depends upon the opacity of the density of the cornea of recipient.
Ma'am, thickness we evaluate preoperatively by ASOCT. And then depending on the depth of the opacity, we just take 5 micron more than that. Nothing.
Very interesting, Dr. Sati. I think it's a very elegant surgery what you have shown. And
Yes.
I think the future will be done that way. The only issue is that if there are dense scars, then the femtosecond will not help in such cases. We have to go back to our treatments.
Yeah, this is our observation also. But still it is doable, sir, maybe because at least some part, especially in the periphery, if you see it's clear, then the position becomes very clear, and that part you can take care of by the crescent.
Yes, I agree with you. And those areas, as you told, you can dissect it gently.
Yeah.
Because where they are not densely adherent to.
Yeah.
Hello, I just want to ask you. Hello.
Yeah, I'm hearing, sir.
What is your failure rate in such case?
I have already shown that there were no complications, sir. And in addition to that, I have also shown that what usually comes to our mind, that how strong is their position. If there's a trauma, then how the graft will be taken off in post-operative period. So we did 3 phacos in such patients by Stellaris machine with normal parameters. We even didn't, reduce the bottle height or something of that sort. So we have found that it's gone well. So it's the practical thing which I'm telling you, sir, that we didn't get any popping of these tissues. Obviously, I was scared of that, but fortunately I didn't get. So it means that the firm stability gets achieved with time. That's what I can say.
Do you find that BCL, bandage contact lens, will help you post-operatively? Do you keep it?
No, sir. Actually, we firstly, the firm apposition between the host and donor tissue. That is the beauty of femtosecond laser, because you get exact cuts. We are taking same diameter. You have seen in the video also. That's one. Second, to further reinforcement to this, we have glue also. So I think glue also giving some sort of scarring at that local site. That's 2. And third, bandage contact lens usually doesn't help, sir, in this, but that's just because since we are applying glue and there was epithelial defects, so just to circumvent over those things.
Thank you. Good.
I think we can move on to the next speaker.
Thank you.
Dr. Sukriti Upadhyay.
Good morning, ma'am. I will be starting my PPT. So the topic of my free paper is clinical outcome of DMEC in clinical outcome of Descemet membrane endothelial keratoplasty cases at the tertiary care hospital in North India. So process of corneal transplantation has evolved with time, just like human beings have, from penetrating keratoplasty to lamellar keratoplasty and to endothelial keratoplasties. Descemet membrane endothelial keratoplasty was first proposed by Malley's group in 2006. The donor descemet membrane was stripped and injected into the host anterior chamber after descemetorexis through a 3.5 mm of clear corneal incision. By transplanting less tissue, DMEC is most anatomic replacement of disease endothelium. Indications include Fuchs endothelial dystrophy, PBK, PPCD, CHED, and ICE syndrome, previously failed PK or EK, and post-traumatic endothelial dystrophy or post-recurrent herpetic endotheliitis. The contraindications are anterior stromal scarring, full thickness corneal opacity, adherent leukomas, high irregular astigmatism, eyes with aphakia and large iris defects, or eyes with glaucoma drainage devices. Patient with previous PPVs. So aim of this study is to analyze the clinical outcome of DMEC in 200 patients after having endothelial decompensation due to various etiologies at the tertiary care hospital in North India. Objective is first to document the pre-operative and post-operative best corrected visual acuity in every patient. Second, to record the endothelial cell density of the donor cornea pre-operatively and post-operatively to enumerate the complications of surgery. This is a prospective interventional study conducted in upgraded Department of Ophthalmology, SMS Medical College and Hospital from January 2017 to July 2019. Study population included patients attending the upgraded Department of Ophthalmology, SMS Medical College and Hospital, Jaipur. There were 200 eyes were taken. Inclusion criteria for the study was bullous keratopathy, Fuchs dystrophy, PPCD, ICE syndrome, CHED, or failed keratoplasty. Exclusion criteria included stromal scarring, keratoconus, anterior stromal opacities, aniridia, extensive peripheral anterior synechia, uncontrolled end-stage glaucoma, aphakia with grossly distorted pupil, or significant posterior segment pathology. Cornea stored in MK media with endothelial cell count more than 2,500 were taken as donor cornea. DMEC graft was prepared by operating surgeon in the OR just prior to the DMEC roll insertion. Size of the graft was taken as 8 mm. Patients were followed up post-operatively at day 1, day 7, and then every 1 month till 12 months. All the patients were given post-operatively steroid drops which were tapered. So we have the indications for our study had majority of patients were from bullous keratopathy amounting to 64%. The second most common indication in this study was previous graft failure, that was 18%. So best corrected visual acuity in pre-operatively, we can see that about 97.5% of the patient had visual acuity less than 1.3 logma, and post-operatively around 55% of the patient were lied in the range of 0.2 to 0.3, and 26.5% had lied in the range of 0.5 to 0.8. Mean endothelial cell density decreased from 2,674 plus minus 158 cells before surgeries to 2,125 plus minus 271 and 1,940 plus minus 275 at 6 months and 1 year post-operatively. Most common complication noted in our study was DM detachment, presenting around 11%, and these patients underwent, they needed air bubble re-injection, and primary graft failure was noted in around 2% of the patients. So there have been studies by Price which have shown that the corneal transplant rejection is significantly reduced with DMEC as compared to DSEC and penetrating keratoplasties. Similarly, the DMEC has shown better visual acuity, better visual outcome than DSEC in studies. So to conclude, the benefits of DMEC include better visual acuity, visual quality, and faster recovery, being sutureless and less incidence of graft dislocation, lowest risk of immunological rejection of all type of corneal transplant, and total corneal thickness remain unaffected as there is practically no edema of the donor lenticle in the early post-operative period, no crowding of peripheral anterior chamber, and no need for special or costly instrument for donor lenticular preparation. To conclude, DMEC provide a refractively neutral, near complete rapid visual rehabilitation with endothelial cell density similar to earlier endothelial keratoplasty technique. This combined with relatively low complication rate indicate that the DMEK is a safe and effective treatment for corneal endothelial disorders. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I open the questionnaire round open. I request the doctors if they may have any questions, they may go ahead with them.
Very interesting analysis, and I think it reiterates what we know, that DMEK is the procedure to be followed for all endothelial diseases. And good presentation, Dr. Sukriti.
Thank you, sir.
All right. I'm guessing there are no more questions or feedbacks. Thank you, Dr. Sukriti Upadhyay.
Thank you.
Moving
can
on
invite,
to our next.
Next speaker is
Yes.
Dr. Anurag Kumar Kashyap. Is there? Dr. Anurag Kumar Kashyap?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Good morning. Sir. You can load your this.
Anurag, Dr. Anurag, you have 6 minutes.
Yes.
Yes, try and conclude within the time range. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, kindly switch on your camera, sir.
Yeah, sure. Just a second, sir. So is my presentation visible? So good morning, everybody. So my topic of presentation is a clinical study of effects of vitamin D supplementation in dry eye disease patients. My AIS number is mentioned over here. The authors have no financial interest in the matter of subject. Introduction. As per the recent definition of the dry eye, which was updated in TFOS Use to 2017, dry eye is a multifactorial disease characterized by a loss of homeostasis of the tear film and accompanied by ocular symptoms in which instability of tear film, hyperosmolarity, inflammation, and neurosensory abnormalities, they play a main neurological roles. The main core mechanism was tear hyperosmolarity. The lacrimal functional unit, it consists of lacrimal glands, the ocular surface, eyelid, meibomian glands, and the associated nerves. Dysfunction of any of the lacrimal functional unit component leads to dryness in eyes, which could be because of the changes in volume, distribution, composition, and tear clearance. The reduction of tear secretion leads to aqueous deficiency type of dry eye disease. Eyelid margin inflammation and meibomian gland dysfunction are the major causes of evaporative type of dry eye disease. Both these forms, they ultimately lead to faster evaporation of tears, leading to the local hyperosmolarity. Prevalence was noted to be 5 to 50% and was higher in Asians than in Caucasians, with more women being affected than men. A distinctive cytokine profile was associated with dry eye disease patients, which can be a possible explanation for hyperalgesia symptoms that they have. Recently, vitamin D deficiency has been suggested to be a contributory factor, and vitamin D supplementation to improve the dry eye disease symptoms. We plan this study to find out the same. Aim of the study was to study the effects of vitamin D supplementation in dry eye disease patient. Material method study was a hospital-based interventional study conducted in Regional Institute of Ophthalmology, Banaras Hindu University. Ethical clearance was taken and was approved by the Institute's Ethical Committee. Was conducted from June 2018 to May 2019 with 40 patients included in the study. Inclusion criteria was patients who gave consent and dry eye diagnosed patients. Patients with corneal pathologies, contact lens users, and other eye disease were excluded from the study. Method, 40 patients were diagnosed based on Schirmer's and tear breakup time with dry eye disease. They were included in the study, and all patients were evaluated for serum vitamin D levels, and they underwent thorough ocular examination, including visual acuity assessments and ocular surface. They all took ocular surface disease index questionnaires also. Oral vitamin D supplementation was given in form of tablets, 60,000 international units once a week for 4 weeks. patients were evaluated on follow-up visits of 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and 10 weeks. Data was collected on a structured pro forma and care was taken to minimize any risk factors, any risk for missing and erroneous data. Statistical methods, pair t-test was used to evaluate the mean, standard deviation, and p-value of the variables. Observation and result, they were demographically, they were 45% men and 55% women with mean age of 34.5 years and mean serum vitamin D level of 20.70 nanograms per ml. Vitamin D level of less than 20 nanograms per ml was determined to be a vitamin D deficiency, and more than 20 shows insufficiency. We saw the patients with tear breakup time and Schirmer's falling in category of severe dry eye disease. Majority of them had vitamin D deficiency, as was also seen in case of higher OSDI scores, which was associated with more dryness. They were also having serum vitamin D deficiency. After oral vitamin D supplementation, there was significant improvement in tear breakup time and Schirmer's at 2 weeks and 6 weeks from pre-treatment values. Also in OSDI scoring, there was a significant lowering of the scores from pre-treatment values at 6 weeks of the follow-up visits. Discussion, our study findings shows that there is an association between dry eye disease and vitamin D concentrations. This was supported by our finding of higher OSDI scores and lower T-BUT and Schirmer's scores in vitamin D deficient patients, which indicated a positive vitamin D and T-BUT, vitamin D and T-BUT, and vitamin D and Schirmer's. Our study was findings were similar to that of Yoon S.Y. et al. And Kurutul et al. Conclusion, our study revealed improvement in dry eye symptoms with vitamin D supplementation, though a study with larger sample size would be needed for concrete facts. These were my references. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Kashyap, what was the sample size in the earlier studies?
Sir, Yoon et al. Was having a sample size of around 100.
Okay. So I feel we should have a bigger sample size to make the drastic recommendation that people with dry eye disease need vitamin D supplementation. So I think we need more data to corroborate this fact and make that as a routine part of our therapy of dry eye disease.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And what was the post vitamin D supplementation? So was there any difference of the levels of the vitamin D and your results of OSDI?
Ma'am, post vitamin D supplementation, there was a improvement in serum vitamin D concentration for up to this 6 weeks, which later on that came to the original values when we followed them up with for another that around 10th weeks. There was improvement. There was this lowering of the OSDI scores, which we had especially done at the 6th week of their follow-up visits.
Okay, and in all patients was the same, or there was a difference of level and there was a difference of these results?
Ma'am, it was the majority of the patient, it was the same.
And I feel you should continue this study and to see at the end of 1 year or 2 years,
yes,
how was the results and whether, I mean, this could be this also. And we need long-term studies and more sample size.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Interesting study. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Shall we go on to the next speaker?
Hello,
Dr.
I just want to ask
Yes.
one question, please.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Don't you think required, because vitamin D, hypervitaminaceous and other things, before you start your vitamin D treatment, are you bothered to see the serum vitamin D level prior to starting of vitamin D?
So we had done pre-treatment values already more, and there was this finding that most of the Indian population, they were having vitamin D either insufficiency or vitamin D deficiency. Most of the patients, they had this. So we started the 40 patients which we had, they were either vitamin D deficient or insufficient.
So you don't usually, I mean to say, all the patient. Hello. You don't do.
So vitamin D estimation.
Yeah, every patient.
No, sir. So because there was this limited opportunity for us to have vitamin D estimations,
Right.
so we don't recommend everybody to have
Right.
go with the vitamin D. Yes.
And how long you continue vitamin D? How long?
So we gave for this 4 weeks only.
4 weeks only.
Yes. Sir.
There is no repetition afterward. You mean to say?
No, sir. After 4 weeks, we didn't give them any.
Every weekly once sachet.
Once a week, yes. Sir.
Thank you. Nice place.
Thank you.
All right, moving to the next speaker. We have Dr. Abhilash Sakam.
Good morning, one and all. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see it, sir.
Okay. Myself, Dr. Abhilash, and this is my presentation based on a randomized control trial to evaluate the role of oral doxycycline in treating fungal keratitis. I have no financial disclosure. Coming to introduction, fungal keratitis being the most common severe form with 15 to 25% of perforation rate, and we needed TPK rate of 20 to 40%. Outcomes were poorer in large fungal ulcers. When compared with bacterial, the cost of care for fungal keratitis is more than 3 times. The doxycycline is a broad-spectrum antibiotic. It is an effective metal iron chelator and which inhibits MPP activity. Doxycycline appears to have a greater effect on inhibiting collagenase that causes corneal melting. Most of our topical drugs are fungistatic, that does not address the ongoing process of corneal melting. And the use of the anti-metalloproteinase such as doxycycline therefore has an advantage in treating ongoing stromal necrosis, thereby directing management at stabilizing corneal melting. The purpose of this study is to evaluate the efficiency of oral doxycycline for its matrix metalloproteinase inhibitor role in the treatment of fungal keratitis to prevent disease progression and corneal perforation. Coming to methodology, it is a prospective randomized double-blinded placebo trial which was conducted in 363 patients for a period of 2 years, and the outpatient department from the corneal clinic at Srikaran Institute of Ophthalmology, Kakinada. Inclusion criteria: all patients with diagnosis of fungal corneal ulcer which are confirmed by smear and/or culture on dextrose agar were included. Either sex of age in between the 14 to 80 years were included. Coming to our exclusion criteria, we excluded 1A patient aged less than 14 years and more than 80 years, pregnant and lactating female, patients who received prior treatment elsewhere for more than 1 week, and large ulcers greater than 8 mm in diameter, and also impending perforation and which requires surgical intervention. We measured incidence of perforation and incidence of surgical intervention. On our intervention, a total of 410 participants were recruited in the trial. Among them, Group A were divided, Group A and Group B. Group A received doxycycline 100 milligrams BD for 15 days. In Group B, they received oral placebo, mimicking similar dosage and duration respective along. As required by the physician, both groups received antifungal treatment. In Group A, we lost 13 members, and in Group B, we lost 34 patients. And the study was completed with 192 participants in Group A and 171 participants in Group B, a total of 363. It is a simple randomized allocation was done using computer-generated sequence, allocation concealed, and each participant was assigned an order number and received the capsule in the corresponding pre-packaged opaque envelope. The participant as well as the primary care providers were blinded, and the code was broken only after data collection was completed. Coming to our results, age and sex were equally distributed in both the groups. The ulcer size, depth, and causative organism were equally distributed in both the groups. Only 39 cases in doxycycline group required surgical intervention when compared to 55 in the placebo group, which was statistically significant. And the doxycycline group also have only 4 cases of corneal perforation when compared to 11 in the placebo groups, which was also significant. This was our results, and incidentally, we found that in our area, fusarium was more common in both doxy as well as the placebo group. And in doxycycline, we did therapeutic penetrating keratoplasty in 20.3%. In placebo group, we did 30.4%. And perforation rate was 2.1% in doxycycline group, and it was 6.4% in placebo group. And I want to conclude, oral doxycycline with its matrix metalloproteinase inhibitor activity has a promising role as an adjuvant therapy in fungal keratitis when started early in the treatment period by reducing the chances of ulcer progression to corneal perforation and also decreasing the need for surgical intervention. Thank you.
What is the information from earlier studies, doctor? Because this is a known fact that doxycycline does help in stabilization of the corneal melting. But are there any similar studies done earlier?
Yes, sir. There are similar studies based on the doxycycline, but what they suggested they did not mention the depth of the ulcer. Only based upon the thinning of the ulcer, they started the doxycycline study, which shows the promising results.
And exact what was the dose which they studied, like 15 days only doxy, or it is more than that, and at what point?
Madam, they studied only for the 15 days. Actually, we also studied only for the 15 days because in our study based after the 15 days, either the ulcer progressed to a very to the therapeutic penetrating keratoplasty or it resolved.
Thank you.
Hello. Just I want to ask you, do you repeat it again? Means you mean to say after 15 days means you feel if
No, sir. By the 15 days, as it becomes thin, we took the patient to surgical intervention or the ulcer heals, sir.
Even post-operative, you don't advise doxy?
No, sir.
Just to prevent recurrence.
But I congratulate you for the good work. The study design is very good. And I think getting so many fungal ulcers for this is very difficult, following it up. I appreciate the hard work behind this study.
Thank you, sir.
Moving to the next speaker, if you all don't have any more questions.
Yeah, next speaker, Dr. Seja.
Okay. Ma'am, ma'am, is my PPT visible, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Good morning to one and all.
No, at present,
it's not visible yet.
You are visible, but not the PPT.
1 second, ma'am.
Dr. Srija, if you can start
yes,
sharing your screen.
1 second, ma'am. Ma'am, now is it visible, ma'am?
No. Yeah, it's coming.
Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, now it's visible, ma'am?
Yeah, it is visible.
Yeah, okay. Good morning to one and all. Today, I will be presenting on the management of irregular corneal astigmatism using mini-scleral lenses. The primary objective of my study is number of visits taken for the correct fit of the lenses, their complications, and patient satisfaction using a questionnaire. The secondary objective is the improvement of visual acuity after these lenses were fit. Material and methods. This was a prospective interventional study, and after obtaining clearance from the Ethical and Scientific Committee, informed consent was obtained from the participants. And those patients with corneal ectasias, post-keratoplasty and post-refractive surgery ectasias were included in the study, and those with ocular surface disorders, patients requiring surgical treatment, and those who had media opacities in the visual axis were excluded from the study. Detailed ophthalmological examination was carried out, including the corneal topography with pentacam, and after the diagnosing of corneal irregular astigmatism, patients were given mini-scleral lenses. McAsphere miniscleral lens trial set was used, and the material of the lens was fluorosilicon acrylate. This is a picture of the trial set of the lens. There were 2 trial sets consisting of 13 lenses each, and the diameter of the lens was 16 millimeters. So how the first trial lens was selected was based on the different corneal profiles, whether the cornea was flat, steep, or normal, and then the central and the peripheral fit were assessed. For the central fit, the fluorescein stained tear reservoir was checked, and the thickness should have been at least 300 microns. And in the peripheral zone, the landing and impingement was checked. There shouldn't be severe edge lift, or there shouldn't be blanching due to the impingement. So first patient examination was done, then the first trial lens was selected, and the fitting was evaluated. That is the central and the peripheral. Centrally, the tear reservoir was checked. If it was less, the base curve of the lens was steepened. If it was high, the base curve was flattened. In the peripheral lens landing, the movement was checked for. So if there was movement, the landing zone was reduced. If there was impingement, there was increased the landing zone. So after both central and peripheral fittings were acceptable, over the lens refraction was done, and then the conjunctival staining was checked for. No stain on the conjunctiva means it is an acceptable fit. The converted power was added to the trial lens power, and the order was placed. A full day trial was done, and the number of visits taken to achieve the correct fit was recorded. Then a contact lens impact on quality of life questionnaire was used, which was given to the patient on day 1, 1 month, and 6 months. This indicated the patient satisfaction. The mean comfortable wear time, best corrected visual acuity, and any complications were recorded during the follow-up period of 6 months. Coming to the results, this study included 32 eyes of 24 patients, and the age of the patients ranged from 18 to 49 years. 69% were male and 31% was female. And the major indication in this study, 69% was keratoconus. Out of the keratoconus, 23% had apical scar and 17 eyes had no apical scar. So the number of visits taken to achieve the correct fit in majority of the cases, that is 75%, was 2 visits, and 3 eyes took 1 visit and 5 eyes 3 visits. So the association between the mean baseline best corrected visual acuity and number of visits was statistically significant with a p-value of less than 0.05. The association between the average central keratometry and number of visits were also found to be statistically significant. Higher the keratometry values increases the number of visits. The mean baseline best corrected visual acuity was approximately 0.50 logmar, and with miniscleral lens, it improved to 0.14, which was also statistically significant. So 85% of the patients had no complications, 6% had allergic conjunctivitis, 6% had tight fit, and 3% had tight fit after 1 month. All these when treated resolved, and they could continue wearing the lenses. The improvement in mean click raw score and click person measure according to the questionnaire between day 1, 1 month, and 6 months of follow-up was also statistically significant. And this shows the click raw score and click person measure gradually increased from day 1 to 6 months in these patients. There is positive correlation between the total score obtained on day 1 and at the end of 6 months, which was also statistically significant. Coming to the discussion, multiple modes of visual rehabilitation have been proposed in corneal ectasias causing irregular astigmatism. Miniscleral contact lenses seem to be one of the effective options. They correct residual emmetropia, high order aberrations, and they provide adequate tear length, masking the corneal surface irregularities. So how is this lens different? The landing zone is less than 1.5 mm, and they are thinner, so greater lens rigidity. They have lower corneal clearance, which increases the oxygen delivery. They have reduced limbal clearance, so better lens centration, and reduced mass and less movement, which makes it more tolerable. This is a picture of the miniscleral lens, which was used in my study. That is, there was an aspheric peripheral zone and different edge lifts were present. So the number of visits in our study was similar to previous studies on scleral lenses and corneal rigid gas permeable lenses. So fitting these miniscleral lenses does not increase the number of visits compared with other types of scleral lenses or corneal rigid gas permeable lenses. In our study, 85% of the eyes had no complications, which was similar to the previous studies, and all patients expressed handling difficulties on day 1, but they were comfortable handling the lenses at the end of 3 months. The average total score obtained using the questionnaire on day 1 and at the end of 6 months showed a positive correlation, which was statistically significant. And even patients with higher keratometry values could also be fit with these miniscleral lenses. This indicates that they are feasible option for higher keratometry values. Conclusion, miniscleral lens can be used in irregular corneal astigmatism for visual rehabilitation, and patient satisfaction was obtained. Keratometry values played a significant role in determining the number of visits. Limitations were smaller sample size and short-term follow-up. These were my references. Thank you, one and all.
Yeah, that's a good study. And do the judges have any comments? Dr. Deepshika, Dr. Pant?
This is conducted very well. The sample size it needs more, and the cost, like what is the cost to the patient
Yes,
in comparison to the rose scale?
yes, ma'am. Cost was high, but that is why when we chose the patients, we counsel them before, and if they were affordable only, we give. Actually, the cost was
That is a
40,000.
limitation to use for.
Yes, ma'am. That is why we selected only those patients who were affordable, and we counsel them and chose such patients only who were affordable.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Are they manufactured here? Are these Indian lenses or imported lenses?
Yes, yes. So these were in Delhi, from New Delhi,
Okay.
Megasphere companies. So
Okay. Why do they cost so much?
sir, actually, why do they cost? Because of the
I'll just-
peripheral, they have multiple curves, sir. So because to make them asphericity and their, so they cost.
Okay, I understand. Yeah. Okay, good.
Move
Thank
to the next.
Yeah.
Thank you.
let's-
Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Pant, you are please unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you?
Dr. Pant, your mic is muted.
I'm. Hello. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Because I just want to answer your question. Last AIOS, I had been for this course at Dr. Monica Chaudhary. So most of the lenses are manufactured outside India. So that is why it is so costly.
Okay.
And I heard nowadays LBP is also preparing the
Manufacturing them. Yeah.
manufacturing it.
Little lenses.
So we have to know it regarding that. It's a
Okay.
good thing. It's a very good thing.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. Dr. Chauhan, can you please upload your slides? Hi, Dr. Chauhan.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Share screen, green color. Hello.
Yeah, you are audible and your screen is also visible. Please start.
So your timer is already started. Please start.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm sorry, there was a little glitch here. So my presentation is donor corneal utilization and rejection pattern. It is a 9-year review of a tertiary eye care hospital from North India. There is no financial disclosure. Corneal transplantation or keratoplasty is the most commonly performed and also the most successful allogenic transplant worldwide. A significant proportion of the cornea harvested are found unsuitable for transplantation. Procurement of eyes by trained personnel, proper storage, and evaluation of donated cornea is critical for the success of corneal transplantation. Around 270,000 donor corneas are required for performing 1 lakh corneal transplantation surgery in India. In India, it is estimated that there are approximately 6.8 million people who have vision loss less than 6/60. And according to National Program of Control of Blindness, there are currently 120,000 corneal blind person in the country. And there is addition of around 25,000 to 30,000 corneal blind cases every year. So a retrospective observational study was conducted in the tertiary eye care hospital in North India to see donor cornea utilization and rejection pattern over a period of 9 years. And this study was conducted from, it was retrospective study, and the cases were taken from April 2011 to March 2020. And a total number of 1,273 of eyes were donated during the period collected in the hospital from voluntary donor as well as from the eye donation centers. And the detailed medical history and cause of death was noted in all the cases. All the eyes were collected irrespective of the cause of death. Viral markers were done for all the donors. If the sample was found to be reactive for any, then it was not used for corneal transplantation and discarded properly. Team involved in that particular eye donation was intimidated and needful was done. All the donor eyes were graded after slit lamp examination, and cornea with specular count more than 2,000 cells is utilized for optical transplantation, and with suboptimal specular count for therapeutic transplantation. Donor poor quality were utilized for training or research purposes. This retrospective analysis of 1,273 donor eye over a period of 9 years was done from the institutional Haryana State Eye Bank, and out of these, among 672 donors, 2 eyes each were collected, and 607 donors, 1 donor eye from 71 donors. 774 donor eyes, that is 60%, was used for corneal transplantation, and 499 donor eyes were rejected due to some or the other reasons for the transplantation. The rejected donor eyes were used for training purposes because of so many reasons. And this is the detailed analysis of the rejected donor eyes, because the rejected, it was around 40% of the eyes were rejected, and it was seen that out of 499, 330 were rejected due to poor quality. That is very high percentage, and 54 due to corneal opacity, 28 due to HIV positive, corneal disease, degeneration 24, exposure keratopathy 16, hepatitis B 12, inadequate blood sample 8, HCV positive 8, poor MK media 8, malignancy 5, septicemia 4, and microcornea 2. This is the detailed given here, the same detail. Now this poor tissue quality was due to epithelial defect, hazy graft, epithelial edema, stromal edema, Descemet's fold, improper donor tissue collection, or heterogenic scissor cut or abrasion while making buttons. And the death to preservation time was almost 6 hours after the death in almost every cases, around 92% of the cases. And the corneal button were collected and preserved directly in the MK medium. And the death preservation time was grouped in 4 categories, and they were classified according to the total number of eyes. So in different categories, around 30 to 40% eyes were found rejected in almost all the category, whether it was less than 2 hours or more than 6 hours. And this percentage of rejected donor eyes in different group was 34 to 41% that I already told. And these were 398 were male and 44% were female. And these were the age group where the eyes were maximum rejected. This was 50 to 70 years of the people were rejected, where the eye was collected. This was the age group where the maximum eyes were rejected, the donor eyes of the age. And now the management of the corneal blindness needs an active corneal transplantation program for restoration of vision, and efficient functioning of eye bank is crucial to meet the demand of the donor cornea. And data from our study suggests that there have been increase in the number of eye donations steadily over the years, but still an additional effort is required to improve awareness of eye donation in the country. Our corneal tissue utilization was 60%, which was less as compared to Patel, Olivia, and Ranjan, but it was better than Bhatt and Dasar. In the current study, the zero prevalence was different. It depends upon the geographical regions. And most of the study, it was seen that in our study, the most common cause of non-utilization of donor cornea was poor donor quality. So in our study, most of the donor eyes were retrieved within 6 hours of death. Thank you. Sorry, I could not conclude.
Dr. Madhukar, unmute yourself. Unmute, Dr. Madhukar.
Yeah. Yeah, you conveyed the meaning, Dr. Chauhan, and we all know what's happening, and that's more or less the story in most eye banks. And good, it was a good analysis of what has been done over 10 years.
Actually, it was done over 10 years, and particularly when our hospital is a government hospital, And because all the government people, they are not dedicated worker and they are not properly trained. I mean, they go by rotation. So sometimes it is first year, second year, or third year resident, they go to retrieve the eye. And actually, they need a proper training how to retrieve the cornea and the transportation and the quality of the, like we are using only MK medium, we are not using cortisol. There are some problems with the government sector, and that is why the maximum rejection was mainly because of the poor quality of the tissue. That is what I really analyzed and observed, that when I was in Ali Prasad, the people were so dedicated and so good quality of corneal tissue were retrieved. And finally, when we tried to implement everything here, it was very, very difficult because people are they are very resistant to all the advices.
Yeah, Dr. Chauhan, we'll have to keep trying. We have to keep trying, and you have done a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can we go on to the next speaker, please? Dr. Jyoti Dhaka. Dr. Jyoti, are you there?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, she is there.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, this is Dr. Weber, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, I am the main
Okay,
author
okay,
of-
please go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Yes. So let me share this. Sir, is my screen visible?
No.
Not yet.
Abhishek. Screen is sharing.
Sir, open your PowerPoint first, sir.
Okay, sir. 1 second, sir. अपने उसमें जाओ, उसको खोलना। अरे ये तो हो जाएगा। ये share screen. Here. Is my screen visible, sir?
Yes, please.
Okay, sir. Good morning to all. My topic is autologous platelet-rich plasma, effect on corneal epithelial defect in post-infectious corneal ulcers.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you, sir. Kindly make it full screen, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. The multi-layered corneal structure acts as a protective barrier to infectious agents via tight junctions between neighboring cells. The shear film composed of lipid, aqueous, and mucin layers also helps maintain corneal transparency and smoothness. Ocular surface disorders caused by infection, inflammation, and injury may cause a delay in wound healing of the corneal tissue, ultimately resulting in visual disturbance and persistent pain. To activate the rapid regeneration of corneal tissue, several growth factors EGF, NGF, and FGF are used as topical. PRP contains concentrated platelets, can be obtained by centrifugation from whole blood mixed with an anticoagulant. Platelets release variety of cytokines and growth factors. With these epitheliotropic factors, facilitates the proliferation, migration, and differentiation of the ocular surface epithelium. On the basis of these properties, serum eye drops have been effectively applied for the treatment of ocular surface diseases, single dry, ocular graft-versus-host disease, persistent epithelial defect, neurotrophic keratopathy, and recurrent corneal erosion. As these derivatives can be obtained from patient's own peripheral blood, there are few side effects and emulation. Material methods related to the clinical records of 15 ISOs of 15 patients with epithelial defect of post-infectious corneal ulcer. The patients were prior treated at some other center with proper antibacterial and antifungal medication with no signs, symptoms, and findings of active infection. But the epithelial defects were persisted even after 30 days or more of the end of the treatment. The patients attended OPD for complaints like ocular watering, irritation, and pain, as persistent epithelial defect under slit lamp after staining with fluorescent strip under cobalt blue filter. Corneal epithelial defect was examined for dimensions under slit lamp after fluorescent staining using cobalt blue filter by making horizontal and vertical slits and taking measurements from scale on the top of the slit lamp by adjusting height of the slit. Total 15 as of 15 patients, mean age 63, ranging 55 to 68 years, 12 male, 3 female were included in this study who visited the OPD between April 19 to March 20 with corneal epithelial defect were treated with autologous PRP. 6 patients were treated for fungal corneal ulcer and 9 patients for bacterial ulcer. Exclusion criteria: patient who had significant systemic illness like thyroid, diabetes, Any leadless abnormalities, seminar palsy, and were excluded from the study. 20 ml of blood was used and mixed with 20 ml of anticoagulant citrate dextrose solution and centrifuged at 1,400 RPM at 8 minutes and then 2,400 RPM for 4 minutes. The upper most layer and buffy coat was separated in a sterile manner and transferred to empty vial of artificial ice. Patients were explained to store these bottles at -15 to -16 degrees centigrade in freezer and shift to lower compartment of refrigerator 30 minutes before use at 4 degrees centigrade. A vial of drop was advised to be discarded in 5 days and to visit to hospital for PRP extraction and new while dispensing and to visit soon if found any complaints in eyes like redness, pain or distress to roll out any contaminant in the vial. Frequency of installation was explained to be 6 times a day and asked to review initially every alternate day and then every 3 days and then every 5 days, and those was reduced as per response to QID and DID. So this is a table of patients with age, then their horizontal epithelial defect, vertical epithelial defect, and time taken. Out of 15 patients, 14 patients achieved almost complete revitalization except one, aging 67 years, due to poor compliance and hygiene, who landed up into infectious ulcer again, and symptoms and signs of inflammation was started with injectables and eye drops. So the average horizontal diameter of corneal epithelial defect after fluorescein staining on cobalt blue filter of slit lamp was 6.25 mm, ranging 4.5 to 8 mm. Vertical dimension was 10.2 mm. Average ranging 5.4 to 9 mm. The patients before PRP average time taken to heal the epithelial defect after PRP therapy was 15 days, ranging 8 to 22 days. Our study demonstrated that administration of autologous PRP eye drops significantly enhanced the epithelialization in patients with post-infectious corneal ulcer. Since the preservative-free PRP eye drops are prone to contamination, there has been always a concern about the risk of superimposed infection. However, only one case in our series developed ocular infection during the treatment with autologous PRP eye drops. In the light of the growing interest in blood-derived products and the lack of effective treatment for non-healing corneal epithelial defect, platelet plasma seems very promising. It is an autologous product without any preservative, extremely abundant in platelets. It has been proved that platelet-rich plasma, it contains cytokines, growth factors such as PDGF, TGF, beta-1, beta-2, IGF, EGF, EGF, FGF, and IGF. All these mediators set off the process of cell differentiation, proliferation, and migration, angiogenesis, and process of regeneration of the damaged tissue. PRP is known to be conclusion is PRP is known to be an effective modality for corneal epithelial defect treatment with least side effects.
Good morning, Raj.
These are some pictures and references. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Should I start from here? Okay. The topic of my study is neuro-ophthalmic manifestation in patients with HIV/AIDS. So we concluded that the spectrum of neuro-ophthalmic.
Dr. Vaibhav, sir, some background noise is coming from your end, so make sure his.
Thank you, Dr. Vaibhav, for presenting. So my question is, Dr. Vaibhav.
Yeah, unmute your mic, Dr. Vaibhav. Yeah, good.
Yes.
So from where you were collecting this blood? From the blood bank or?
No, ma'am, from the patient. The patient, they used to come in our OPD, and when we used to diagnose them as persistent epithelial defect, we used to collect the sample from their anti-incubator backup.
And these patients which you have treated, it was like that patients you have labeled as a PED or immediately after the this treatment of ulcer?
Ma'am, we label them as PED because after the completion of treatment, one month has been already passed.
Okay. So
they were,
you have not tried the other modalities which are available, those like Tazorafe and all?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to ask you, you prepare once only this autologous serum, and do you keep in a separate bottles like 5, 6, 7, 8 so contamination can be avoided? Because
no,
if you are using only one bottle and always you are using that and keeping in the freeze.
No, sir. Every time a different CMC eye drop which was available in our government hospital setup, we used to inject in that and we used to give to the patient, and the maximum limit of the days, 5 days we used to keep the patient used to keep it for maximum 5 days, and then he was supposed to discard that, and we need to prepare one more.
Every 5 days you prick the patient then?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I think we have come to the end of the session and we have just run out of time. So thank you very much, all the presenters. You've done a wonderful job, and all the participants who has been there, Dr. Deepshika Agrawal, Dr. Pant, and Ms. Hassan. You have set the pace for the show and then ended it on time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
I
you.
think we will share our results with the organizers.
Thank you.
Thank you very
much. And best wishes to all participants. Thank you.